Okay, I don't know how to do that. So I go to your so I've been able to hear you the whole time. So I go to your Discord channel, and then at the bottom, I just turn on my microphone. I'm not coming through. See there. All set.
Hold on. Okay. So for the three people who ever watched this, I'm Alternate Facts, and today I got the same political journalists who showed up two other times to discuss things of whatever value we deem. And provide tonight's entertainment, I'm going to play that fighter jet game that I always play and never discuss. But for the moment, I will get back to things. So, Mr. Swift, how are things going right now?
Oh, they're doing okay, Fact. Sorry for the delay to your to your listeners. You know, when you get older and you have kids, and then you have a wife who's making herself a late dinner, and a kid refuses to go to sleep, you gotta jump on that grenade, so to speak.
Yeah, I bet. Good thing I don't have to worry about that for a few more years, I hope.
Yeah. Well, you know, your children are wonderful. Everyone else's are the real devils. But then, you know, you say that to yourself, but, you know, then your children will do things that you find to be devilish. So it's a vicious circle.
I bet it is. So, how's the war against ignorance and stupidity?
Yeah, it goes. You know, I was talking with a reader about this, and forgive me, I'm getting over a little bit of a cold. And this person said that they were more interested in having us focus on how we got to this point as the Republican Party. And, you know, obviously, many of us have varying degrees of complicity as lifelong Republicans in certain things. And I wrote back to the person, I said, I think we're pretty honest. You know, Bill Kristol, my boss, has made many mea culpas about Sarah Palin. You know, Tim Miller has, you know, kind of said, well, you know, I thought I was doing this, but actually no. And, you know, I didn't really see it. And I mean, there were certain things. I'd always kind of thought I worked for one of the few sane Republicans, and that's why I got out of Congress. It's because I just kind of looked around and, like, you know, after I kind of got burned out, and I'm like, you really want someone that you can look up to and inspire you, and that you would be proud to work. I mean, you get a nice government pension if you work there long enough, but work long hours, have to wear a suit every day for relatively low money, and not see your wife or kids. I didn't have a wife or kids back then. So I kind of got out early and got into journalism. So, you know, but my first boss in politics was Ohio Senate candidate Josh Mandel. And he was a very inspiring guy who inspired me to get involved in politics. And you see him now, and you just can't recognize him. I mean, the demagoguery, the racism. I mean, many isms. I've written a lot about Josh Mandel, and that's my mea culpa. But I didn't make Josh Mandel a success. I just looked up to him and defended him. And there were times when he did do bad things in his career that I said, "Oh, that's just politics." But no, he was just getting sorry, he was just getting warmed up. And you know, maybe I just never really got to know him as well as I thought I did. Um, but I told this reader, I said, look, I don't think a retrospective history lesson where it's like a truth and reconciliation commission for our sins is as helpful right now as trying to point out the modern insanity in the Republican Party. I mean, last I checked, Joe Biden is our president, and a large reason Joe Biden is president is because of voters like me, lifelong Republicans who've seen enough of the Republican Party and crossed over. Now, a lot of them come home, right? You know, they're like, that's just a one time thing. They'll sour on Biden, and many of them have. But we have to kind of point out all these crazy things that Ted Cruz, for example, is doing, and others are. And will it change the world? No, but it does. It does change minds. And when these big articles, when they go big and they get out there, the common conservative refrain is you just can't trust the liberal media. And then these people can say, no, these are lifelong conservatives. They'll just say, well, they sold out, they're liberals now. And that's just how you know that person has shut down their ability for discourse and reason. But we, as conservatives, we may not all be Republicans. I know we want to talk about January 6th. After the Republicans, threw in the towel on the January 6th Commission, the exception of Cheney and Kinzinger, we don't pick a party in Virginia. It's an open primary state. But I just said on another podcast, I don't consider myself a Republican anymore. Because that day I take very seriously as a former Hill staffer. And, that they wouldn't take that seriously, and what we've seen in the year since has just been disgusting.
Yeah, that's very good dialogue on that thing. One of the things I guess I want to question is, as a staffer, how intimate, in a sense, professionally, would you get with the legislator you're serving? And how would you say that actually does influence your views on their policies and their objectives? I know in the past live stream you said that part of the reason why Republicans were so bent on maintaining climate change now is because more of the dogma than necessarily some of the influence from donors. Would you say this feeds into that kind of effect?
Yeah, as a staffer, you do have influence. And, my first boss as a senator I worked for 4 years. Senators naturally have much bigger staff because they represent entire states as opposed to legislative districts that represent, 600, 700,000 people. When I worked in the House, literally our office was 3 rooms: the waiting room and lobby, the member's office, and then a room where 7 of us were all crammed in. You got to know your boss pretty well. I was lucky that my boss, Senator Kyle from Arizona, was a very good boss. Not all bosses are good. 2 books that your readers might want to read, I realize they're probably more into gaming, and I like gaming too, is The Speechwriter by Barton Swain and Speechless: Tales of a White House Survivor by Matt Latimer. I worked with both of these guys, or worked for the same boss, and they talk, they're both speechwriters, but they talk about, speechwriters get a little bit more intimate than the junior staff because, you're crafting for speeches or addresses to chambers of commerce or things like that. But they get to know these people pretty well, and it's a story of horrific bosses. And I think government service is noble. I had my time because I just looked around and didn't find anyone on my side really that I found so compelling and noble. But you can influence your boss. My last job in the House, I helped get my boss to come up with a solution to a very complicated water problem in northern Kentucky. And it wouldn't have completely solved the solution, but it would have been better than just complaining about it. It would have provided a roadmap to fixing this in the least restrictive and probably least costly means, in something called a consent decree, which is like an organized agreement between parties that is overseen by a judge. They last forever. And it was raising water rates in Kentucky because they hadn't done much on their sewers, and they had to fix their pollution issues. So I was able to work with a Democratic office, and we were able to resurrect an old bill that would address this. Now, that bill never became law. I was able to stop my boss from getting on some bad bills. A lot of the times, your job as a staffer, especially for House members, because, they vote way more than senators do, and they go spend their time in the Capitol, and they'll be rubbing shoulders and be like, hey, Louis Gohmert, here, I got this bill. It talks about this. He's just going to give you the top line. He's not going to give you any of the horrific specifics. And a good boss will say, well, that sounds interesting to me. Get a copy over to my staff, and I'll have them review it and see if I'm interested. Other people just sign on immediately right there, and then you have to try and pull your boss off of this bad bill. Then that pisses off the constituent groups that wanted the bill. So a lot of your role as a staffer is to interpret the proposals and information that come from other offices and try and do what your boss wants to do. Sometimes your boss doesn't know what they want to do. But that's where you can kind of make your mark, and that's either for good or for bad. Some staffers have really bad intentions, and they don't really care about the constituents, and they think, oh, no one's going to care about this. And so, they'll get boss on a bad bill. But I remember one time there was a bill that my boss was on, 2-year term of Congress. He was in office, and it was this horrific beer wholesaling protection racket. And I just prepared for him a memo with lots of articles making good points. And, the beer wholesalers helped get him into Congress, but he refused to join the bill, and they were livid. But I felt like I had done something that was right because it was good for the country, and it was good for the district, except maybe the beer wholesalers. But as much as I like beer, screw them.
So I'd actually, bringing up your example with, say, legislative signing choice bills, I got a question, is that, would you say that nowadays a lot of freshman congressional members just display a lot less restraint than the job frankly requires?
Yeah. I'd say that's probably more pronounced on the Republican side. And, what we've seen demonstrated from the Republican Party in recent years is that they're not really interested in legislating. They're interested in messaging. Other team bad. Bad. And, you see these Madison Cawthorns and the Marjorie Taylor Greenes and the Lauren Boeberts. I mean, Marjorie Taylor Greene has already introduced legislation to impeach Joe Biden. They are not. I mean, Madison Cawthorn, the gentleman in a wheelchair from North Carolina, most of his office, assuming that he can keep these staff, he's been burning through them at a high rate because he's not serious, and people are quickly realizing that and don't want to hitch their, wagon to that horse. It's mostly a communication shop. And then you look at some of these ostensibly more serious people, educated people like Ted Cruz, who, was Solicitor General of Texas, one of the biggest states, argued in front of the Supreme Court, went to Princeton, went to Harvard Law School, and now all he wants to do is own people on Twitter and have a video podcast with late 20-something, early 30-something nobodies that are only popular on the fringe right. That's not demonstrating an interest in being serious or being a legislator. Marco Rubio, who I voted for in the primary in 2016, I thought he was sort of like that. That he was serious. And during the Trump years, we learned that it was all a show. He was going to retire from the Senate because he didn't win the primary and just ride off into the sunset. And he decided he just wanted to come back. And he came back with a vengeance in an unrecognizable way. And that's just sort of the MO for these folks. And legislation, sadly, the legislative process is broken down where it's just basically now high-level negotiations between majority and minority leader offices and the chairs and ranking members of committees. Very rarely does legislation get passed now like you learned on Schoolhouse Rock. I don't know if any of your listeners watch Schoolhouse Rock or know I'm just a bill. It doesn't start out really that way anymore, but it used to be way more like that. I mean, there were 12 appropriations bills, and they would have to go through all of them after they would pass a budget. But now they just pass these consolidated spending bills and these consolidated budget resolutions. And, I don't know exactly what the need for as many staffers is anymore. You could just keep some older smart guys and a comms person and save the taxpayers a lot of money. So if you're not going to do the work of committee stuff, most of these hearings are pointless theater anyway. I mean, look at the Republicans bringing Diamond and Silk and, right-wing certifiable, social media nut jobs to committee hearings. They've just not demonstrated any seriousness in years.
I see. That's so one.
Says the guy with the birds aren't real flag behind his.
One question, actually, I would like to ask that kind of ties into. You've touched on it with your discussion of the beer wholesalers issue. Would you say that legislators in both houses today are effectively held accountable for how they vote, good or bad? Is that something that just not whatsoever no, or just
no, not whatsoever no, but generally no. I mean, most incumbents win re-election. I mean, incumbents are like children. Everyone else's sucks, but mine's a good one. Except when he's a bad one. But I'll forgive him on that one little vote. He's generally good. I think we've seen some more volatility in recent years about incumbents, and we're going to see more probably going into this cycle because of redistricting. But generally, incumbents are almost always likely to win. I mean, there's a Republican congressman who literally paid for an abortion or encouraged his mistress to get an abortion, and he'd pay for it. And he still won re-election. I don't know if he's still a member now. I'm going to spare your listeners the keyboard typing, but that guy worked across the hall from me, and I just thought, like, imagine being a pro-life woman working in that office, assuming you weren't sleeping with him. How are you supposed to feel? And that sort of hypocrisy abounds, but, that stuff doesn't, even when it gets to voters, they still win.
So I guess the question really matters I would like to ask, and it's one I've really always wondered about, is what exactly do we do about the American voter when they're willing to provide a benefit of the doubt to people like this and are consistently, I'm not going to necessarily say not acting in their self-interest, but are kind of tolerable to certain questionable practices? What is there a solution, or is this just some sort of eternal fight we're going to figure out how to live with?
It's like a cancer. Brian Kaplan wrote a really good book probably 12, 15 years ago called The Myth of the Rational Voter, which I would encourage people to read. And I mean, the data is probably way out of date because it was written in like 06, 07, 08. But his conclusion is voters aren't rational. They're mostly tribal. And you see this in talking with people. My other boss is Sarah Longwell, the Bulwark. She has the podcast that she did, and she's going to bring back another season where she brings on a political guest. Like, she brought on the great Raging Cajun James Carville, and he got to basically sit behind the digital glass of this focus group, and they would just talk about what voters say. And I think misinformation is just such a huge thing, or alternative facts, you might call them. And Facebook plays a huge role in this. Twitter less so, because most people don't use Twitter. Most normal people don't use Twitter. Only the highly engaged do. But you look at all of the stuff that is popular on Facebook, and it's like Ben Shapiro. Ben Shapiro employs Candace Owens, who's a vax truther who routinely makes stuff up. He employs many other quacks. And Ben used to be one of the cool kids, smart conservatives. I've never really thought that. I've always thought Ben Shapiro was overrated. And it's like that line from 10 Things I Hate About You. Like, what is it with this chick? Does she have beer-flavored nipples or something? Like, conservatives always want to believe in young star power because most of their people are old. Most of the party is old. Most of its voters are old. Most of its legislators are old. And so anytime some kid who can string a sentence together along, or in cases like Madison Cawthorn or Lauren Boebert have trouble with that, they're like, this is the next great hope. And, it's depressing. But, I think, sorry, if the way out of this is making sure that the bad people lose. And it doesn't necessarily mean you have to become a Democrat or you have to vote for the Democrat. You could vote for a Libertarian or Independent, but until redistricting, I lived in a Republican congressional district for the first time in my entire life. And I'm like the tippy top of it. The border of it's about a mile down the road from my house. And if you told me that 10 years ago, I'd be like, finally, I get to live where I have a Republican member of Congress and not, one of these far left libs. But when push came to shove, this guy voted to overturn the election. He supported Donald Trump. He was wrong on impeachment both times. He was wrong on the Mueller report. So I voted no. I voted against him. I voted for the Democrat, who I looked up and was a genuinely nice guy. Not my politics, but someone that I think would be a good public servant. And now I'm getting redistricted into a new district where I hope my congresswoman will be Abigail Spanberger, former CIA operative who's a current member of the House. Her district is getting eliminated, and so she has to move to a new one, and she wants to move to ours, and I would be glad to vote for her. She's a moderate Democrat, and the Democrats need more of her. Like, as much as I focus on the Republican side, the Democrats have a side with their far left base. It might be politically as nuts as some of the far right Republicans, but like practically, you're outside of the squad, you are not seeing a lot of Democrats act up in ways that Republicans are. So step one is vote them out. Step two, and Katie Harback on Facebook is, I'm very libertarian, so I'm reticent for the government to get involved here, but disinformation is so pervasive, and something needs to be done to address that. And I don't know what that is, but I know former, chief type people like Katie Harbath at Facebook have left and are trying to find those answers. And I'd be interested in hearing their solutions. I think leave Section 230 alone, but the amount of Russian misinformation is crazy, but, Americans are doing it too. A lot of them. And it's very profitable. And the third solution, I think, is we have to get your generation and people your age to learn to pay for news. Because the amount of information, if I went back in time when I was 17 years old and getting my start in politics in Ohio, and you told me I would have multiple personal computers with video components and I wouldn't have to connect those computers through my phone line, directly, that Wi-Fi existed, and I could have a video conversation being streamed to people to talk about politics, I would have been like, mind blown. A 256 megabyte flash drive cost as much as a Kindle does when I was in college. Now, it's like $55. Now I can get a brand new Kindle for $55. I can go to Dollar General and buy an Android phone for $10. It's nuts. Connectivity has been really great. It's made the world a better place in many respects. But our use of it has been poor. And the news media does bear some blame. The legacy people, we're not legacy, we're only 3 years old, but I guess the Weekly Standard was quasi-legacy, but we didn't give our stuff away for free. And when you give away something for free, as long as you do, people just become acclimated to not paying for it. It'd be like if, what's a very popular freeware game?
Oh, shoot. That's Call of Duty nowadays, isn't it? At least in the West.
Yeah, Call of Duty would be like that, I would say. I've been playing Call of Duty and I love it. Helped me get through the pandemic, make some new friends, connect me with old ones. But it'd be like after years of giving Warzone away for free, they're like, sorry, it's $60 a year now. People would be like, okay, guess I'm not going to play Warzone. People rarely respond positively after being conditioned that something is free. It's just basic psychology. And we have to be able to convince people that not getting your news from patriotblogs.us and getting them from more sensible outlets, even if they're conservative. And, like I was saying, with the growth of information technology and our ways to interact with it, people are just becoming increasingly siloed over time. I probably spend $4,000 a year on publication subscriptions. And I don't even write them off in my taxes. I do it because I want to support them. And I enjoy it. I even read a socialist magazine called Current Affairs. The thing I like about them is their magazine is beautifully designed. There's occasionally an article that will challenge my thinking. But these are younger kids, younger than me, and they're having fun. And they have hilarious parodies and not terribly expensive. And I really like the fun they're having, because journalism, in many ways, with the exception of my job, has stopped becoming fun.
All right, yeah, that's I guess, that's one thing I haven't really heard, Rob, much is the fact that people have gotten accustomed to free information, and that the only real way to get profit creation is to basically have guaranteed income on that doesn't rely on ad revenue. One thing I kind of want to ask you, since you're aware of the older developments, is that I was thinking, recently I was watching the Paul Verhoeven's interpretation of Starship Troopers, and obviously from 1999, one of the interesting elements of it was how the Federation distributed its propaganda essentially by use of early internet. So I, in some sense, have to wonder, was the disinformation issue we see nowadays kind of anticipated back then?
I would say so. there's always been that relationship between political parties, governments, and the press. People want to scoop, but what happens if that scoop turns out to be a lie? You know, um, back in the day, that reporter would just stop working with those people. They'd publish a retraction or a correction and say, "Look, we got duped." But now, like I know people who've been in this industry nearly as long as I do, and they tell me about their jobs, and I feel so badly for them. And I feel so lucky for my job, being able to just work from home in my office and not have to be chained to my desk, and you have to churn out 3 5 to 700 word stories by the end of the day. And, if the clicks are bad, we're going to reevaluate your clicks at, the end of every month. And if you're not delivering traffic to get the ads, and that's part of the other thing is advertising. A lot of semi-reputable sites rely largely on ads, and then maybe some people will give them subscription money. But I would say, just as a general rule of thumb, either the more the publication costs or the more restrictive their paywall is, better quality information you're going to get from it. And it shouldn't have to be that way. Substack has kind of changed that. We use Substack, the Bulwark. It's allowed a lot of independent writers. I mean, even places like the New York Times or Bloomberg Business Week, which are billion-dollar empires, put out great work. They don't seem like fun places to work. And journalism should be about having fun. I mean, back in the old days of the Weekly Standard before I was there, people were smoking in the office, And, at some old papers that have a liquor carton, and you could have a drink at 5 o'clock. But, now it's all super HR, it's all very corporatized, and I feel for a lot of my colleagues.
One element you bring up that I'd like to ask more about is that it seems in the past, well, I'm only 22, so of course I won't say the past 20 years, but I get the sensation that with the advent of digitalization in our office work, American work culture in general has kind of undergone a sterilization, so to speak. And I wouldn't normally bring this up, but I'm kind of wondering how many of our contemporaries just kind of tie into this, an individual's sense of loss of purpose and all that. And we say that journalism is kind of a casualty to this force.
Yeah, I would say it is. The internet changed the way we did everything. I mean, my old magazine was founded before the internet even existed. We even had a cover. It was Smash the Internet, that was critical of the internet. That story didn't age too terribly well.
Or maybe it has.
But, another example about how the growth and changes in technology have just changed the way we do life is, long before you were banking, ATMs were not something that were very common. Mostly you would go to your bank and you'd go into the teller to do things. ATMs are a semi-recent innovation, right? And a lot of bank tellers lost their job due to that kind of automation. The amount of people who work in a physical banking location, maybe not on Wall Street, maybe not, in London or places where they do all the trading on the, on the indices. But your average bank, like my PNC bank down the street, had like 2-3 people working at a time. That would not have been the case when I was younger. I remember because, if I wanted to get money from an ATM, if I could find one, I would have to find one of my bank's ATMs, or I'd have to pay like $3 to $5 convenience fee, which, as a young kid, you don't want to do that. Another one is toll booth operators. There's something here, mostly in the East Coast, we have called Easy Pass. It's a little transponder. You put it in your windshield, and when you take the toll roads, that's what you do. So I remember when I first moved to D.C., I've had Easy Pass, and I could drive, well, Maryland didn't use it at the time. I would drive the Pennsylvania Turnpike, and then when I got to my native state of Ohio, I'd have to hope that I had cash. Because they didn't take credit cards, they didn't take debit cards. There might have been an ATM on the turnpike, but you'd have to get a physical ticket from a machine and then pay up with a person when you got off. Most of those people have lost their jobs because of things like Easy Pass. So journalism isn't the only industry that's been really shellacked by technology, but those are two kind of quick, simple examples to kind of see the hollowing out of local papers. the digitization has hurt local papers, which have declined precipitously. So I always recommend people get their local paper. I mean, I get the Washington Post, which is our local paper, even though it's national. But I also get the weekly Inside Northern Virginia paper. It's like $55 a year. It comes once a week. I was a newspaper delivery boy when I was a kid. Now that job is done by adults. Parents would not let their kids go out at like 2 in the morning and deliver newspapers now. The world has just changed.
Well, that's definitely a no, it's the same, man. All of this stuff nowadays is definitely, we're seeing the consequences of a lot of these changes out. You got any nice stuff you want to share? Any positivity?
Positivity.
Yeah, I know it's hard to come by these days, but there's bound to be some sources. Doesn't have to be politics related. It could be just literally anything. Like you took a nice dump the day before, something like that.
I made a fantastic steak for dinner. I haven't been feeling well, as listeners can hear, but I made myself a really nice ribeye steak. And I think snow is fun. And we recently got snow. It may not have been fun if readers or listeners or viewers heard about all the traffic on I-95 where people were stuck in their car for 27 hours and stuff. That's horrific. But, for me, it was like 4 days because they thought 3 inches of snow, we got 15. So they were not planned adequately for all of this. And so for 4 days, aside from the people in my HOA complaining to me about the state of the roads, which are not my responsibility on the HOA board, it's the state's responsibility, I basically got to go sledding with my girls, make snowmen, let my dogs run around the snow, and we have a neighbor who's probably 11 or 12, and they've got a nice puppy. He brings her over, and they play with my dogs and my kids, and he's super nice. He spent 4 hours building a bobsled track down the hill in my backyard, and so my girls could play with it and the dogs, and it was just, I told him he's always welcome in the yard, but he literally spent, as an 11-year-old, like 4 hours out in the snow. It wasn't terribly cold, but he's from Alaska originally, so he's used to it too.
I mean, he's probably in shorts.
No, he's adequately dressed, but he brought a shovel, he brought a sled, he was packing snow, and he was making like little turns, and he made like a little bank at the end so you don't like run into the fence full speed. And I don't know, that was sort of like one of my happy humanity moments in my personal life that has happened. And we're supposed to get more snow during the next couple days, so we'll see how that goes. But no, as much as I sound like I'm a pessimist, I think Biden's election was a good thing. We have not seen what I hope is the bipartisanship that we were kind of expecting. Most of that's the Republicans' fault. But the radicalization, a lot of people are really hurt in the rear end about Trump, and they still think he's the president. And, they might need to go talk to somebody about that. But I do think there is a growing sane middle, not just on the right, but on the left too, that sees what the extremes are doing and doesn't want to put those people in power anymore. And Joe Biden is hardly extreme. I mean, really the most extreme thing that has happened during his presidency is the withdrawal of Afghanistan, which we panned him for because we're not warmongering neocons, but killing the filibuster over voting rights reform. And, if that's the most radical stuff, I mean, Trump wanted to leave Afghanistan too. I think if he did it, it would have been worse. But, I think that we are beginning to see some green shoots, but it's a long, long way before spring.
No, I guess every common fancy phrase, it's always the darkest before it gets bright again.
Yeah, or as John McCain used to joke, quoting Mao Zedong, it's always darkest before it goes pitch black.
Yeah, well, that too. It's mathematically proven that's how these things typically work out.
Yeah, or it could be like a parabola, or like walking halfway the distance to the wall. You never get to that wall. But
oh yeah, oh man, I had to do so many of those in high school. It wasn't fun, but no, I totally get what you mean. It's limits, right? It's always that. It's like shoot, what was it? I'm sorry, man. You're making me remember calculus. Not that it's bad, but they're always the weird math you can get to asymptotes. Yeah, it's asymptotes we're talking about. That's true.
I wouldn't even remember if you gave me 10 minutes to remember it. Last calculus class I took was like '05.
Like it's fine, man. I'm a physics major who can't do math, so no matter what, you're probably in the clear, relatively speaking.
Well, you guys also have better calculators.
Our best calculator is probably Slater. The homework solution site.
Well, for me, it was the TI-89, which could solve algebraic equations. It made me not have to pay any attention whatsoever once I learned how to solve algebraic equations on my computer, or on my TI-89. Which cost as much as a damn Chromebook. It was like $200.
What do you say? You got your $200 worth out of it?
I still have it, yeah. I put in some batteries because they were corroded, and I still found some of the video games I had loaded onto it by plugging it into the back of my computer.
One of the things I always find curious is how the TI-83 and TI-84 are still $100 nowadays. At least when I last checked.
Yeah, no, they've never really changed. I mean, they might have improved slightly in technology, like they added USB instead of having the one where you had to plug it into the physical pins and needles of the back of your computer like I did. It's just because they've cornered the market and pretty much no one else has determined that it's worth it to mass produce something like that. Another example is when I was in business school, we had a calculator called the HP-12C. And that was like $150. My grandpa had one. I remember it. It was the exact same one. And they didn't even put freaking solar panels on this thing, I don't think, at the time. I mean, which would have been a decent thing that you could do for calculators, right? And I had to do this for like amortization of mortgages and stuff like that. And we knew you would never need those out in the real world because computers can do it. You don't need it on your desk. Computers at the time could do it. My laptop, I could go to a web page and get it done. I mean, there wasn't, like what you're describing, homework solution kind of sites, but we would sell them from person to person to minimize our losses. They would get passed down.
Speaking of education, I got some questions for about the state of the schools in Northern Virginia. So, what's your opinion, I guess, on things like magnet schools and gifted programs and whatnot? How do you feel they are being implemented? Do you approve them? Just your general thoughts. I mean, from my background personally, I'm from a public magnet school that used the lottery system, so I have my own opinions too. But at the same time, I'm kind of immersed in the environment, so I don't really have much insight as to how a parent would see it necessarily.
Yeah, I mean, my kids go to a private preschool, so, I mean, they're not old enough to go to any public ones yet, but I don't know. Politically, I've always believed in backpack funding, which means that you pay your taxes to the state. It varies because, some people pay very little in taxes because they make very little money, and some people pay a lot of money because they make a lot of money, but there's an average for what the spending is, right? Backpack funding typically means that you can go to any accredited school within that region with that amount of money. If it costs more, you pay the difference. If it costs less, you don't get that money back for yourself, right? So like Catholic school might be cheaper than a really nice private school like the ones my sisters went to, which cost as much as a college. Magnet schools, I like magnet schools and I like charter schools. We have a famous one up here called Thomas Jefferson. But what I don't like are the lottery systems. I remember the first time I met President Bush was when the Supreme Court ruled on the legality of school vouchers, and this was like early 2000s when I was like a senior in high school. And I think generally the worst private school is often as worst as the worst public school. In DC in particular, charter schools and magnet schools have done, like KIPP and others, have done immense amounts of really good work to help improve educational outcomes in particularly poorer areas where they tend not to be very high anyway because of funding and bad government and bad maintenance and bad bureaucracy and teachers unions. But the idea of a lottery system to me is so inhumane. It's like the lottery of life. I mean, if you've already gotten the grades, the market should be able to provide other options. Like not everyone could go to Thomas Jefferson High School who might qualify to go there. But other options, Coca-Cola could start the Coca-Cola Academy. Down in Florida, there's actually a private high school that's run by IMG, the sports marketing agency, and they teach the kids, but these kids are all like future potential professional athletes. That's an example, I think, of the market sort of deciding and providing other options. But I don't think enough have come.
Okay.
The lotteries, though, if I'm lucky that I have a good education and I make good money and I can afford to send my kids to the Catholic school if I want to. I'm thinking about that when the time comes. Because that's like $20,000 or something total for two twins that I could have and use, to save for their college and send them to our very good public schools. But, for my wife and me, we're Catholic and we both went to Catholic schools whole way through except my wife's college. And, we believe strongly in our Catholic faith and our education. And, it's one of these tough decisions. That's the tough decision I have. Imagine being a single mother of 3 in Southeast Washington, D.C. and having kids that are like really, like you are a great mom. You work really hard to make both ends meet, both ends meet. And, your kids are studious, they get good grades. And one of them gets in and wins the lottery, and the other 2 don't. How's that fair? I have a problem with the lottery system. But, the only public school I attended was a year of grad school, so I don't have intimate experience with what public education is like. But pretty much everywhere I've lived in my life, the public schools have been better than the Catholic schools I went to.
Okay, that's one of the things I guess I would say. I guess an opinion I've come to hold as I've progressed through my college career is that I've realized in some sense how, I'm not going to say unimportant high school is, but how much quality work can be done at even like your community college or your state university. And I have the personal opinion that in some ways the United States, parents of the United States might be putting a bit too much emphasis on the high schools. And that's not to say that magnet schools and such don't work, because I credit my high school, as painful as it was, with a lot of in fact, the majority of my educational success. But that's not to say that the real opportunity to develop isn't in the college itself. And I'm not even saying, in fact, and even in any college, quite frankly. I think in some sense of higher level schools, you get diminishing returns at the college level. I'm just wondering why there's not more focus on seeing how students can apply themselves when they get to college, as opposed to putting yourself into the rat race to try to get into all the Ivy Leagues and such. Launching from high school.
If you make it into an Ivy League, you're set for life. I went to St. Louis University, which is a nice Catholic school. It's the second oldest Jesuit one in the country in St. Louis, founded in 1818. My sister-in-law went there, and so did my brother-in-law, because they're from there. But the community college aspect, I've always been a fan of. My mom went to community college for 2 years before going to Ohio State. And the reason she did that is because her father was the chair of the business department at that college. And so it was free. But if it wasn't free, it was pretty much darn near close to free. Community colleges are immensely affordable. And I would also argue that there are a couple developmental things that I think are really good about community colleges, in that the professors tend to be better than the ones you get for the first 2 years of your education at a 4-year school. You're often getting teachers' assistants, who are struggling on their own and are, not PhDs and might not even become them. It's like getting permanent substitute teachers, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then there's also the party aspect of college. I mean, I didn't always enjoy that, but first year of college, you're often just like, woo, college, no parents. And I had a guy I went to high school with, lived across the hall from me. He just drank himself straight out of college, and it was sad. My roommate I also went to high school with, his dad got divorced and couldn't afford our school anymore because he had 2 sisters he wanted to finish putting through private high school. But my brother-in-law, the money just wasn't there for him to go straight to my college, which was not, it is and was not cheap. So he went to the local community college, and he worked full-time at bars, and he's now a sommelier. He's the head of beverages for a restaurant group in Texas. And when he finished his associate's degree and he had all his credits, he'd saved up a ton of money because he was living at home. No shame in that.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I do, quite frankly.
Yeah. No, I mean, especially during COVID, too. But, I mean, outside of COVID, no shame in that. He saved so much money because he didn't have to pay rent. And then he got into my college where he got a big scholarship, and he was able to pay for this stuff and not have immense amount of student debt. So I think, I don't know what the financial situation will be like when my kids are getting to college, but I'm not going to be like, you can't go to a community college. And, when kids are really gifted, they can also go to community college at night if they really like school. My sister loves school. I didn't love school, but my sister's the kind of person, I mean, you get AP credit, yeah, but like you could just enroll in community college while you're in high school and take night classes and already be halfway to your associate's degree by the time you graduate high school. It's just Americans push people to go to college who probably maybe shouldn't. Peter Thiel believes in that, maybe a little too strongly. But then there's also this sort of media, like the movies, Old School and PCU, and, think of a college party movie, right? Road Trip. Mm-hmm. I'm probably picking too obscure of examples. You guys probably don't know those except for Old School. But, Hollywood pushes that on people, that's what they have to do. And in some cases it's fine, but in a lot of cases it's dumb.
Yeah, I mean, I transferred to my current school after taking a year at the other one in the same city, and one of the things I kind of appreciate about the lower tier schools is that in some sense, they seem more business-like, but I don't mean that in a bad sense because it's trimmed down, but it doesn't really cost as much because, quite frankly, it costs about half to go to where I went now, and you still got a decent quality education. One of the most important things I found in college, really, aside from just having the curriculum, is that it has opportunities for you to, basically find your own success, which I think is a great thing at public research universities. And I always found it kind of strange how there's a lot of emphasis in the colleges for students to go into the STEM field, but not necessarily try to find research in that field while they're studying, and stuff like that. I guess, as you brought up, the country has a kind of flawed sense of what they should value in their college years. And I guess I'm not really seeing much change on that right now.
No, and it just kind of becomes prevailing winds. Everyone's like, don't be arts and sciences. Would you like fries with that? I was a business school kid, and I definitely made those jokes. But I know people who got Bachelor of Arts degrees who went on to be very, very successful. And I know people from my business school who basically manage enterprise rent-a-car locations. And there's no shame in that, but you don't typically go to business school to manage a rental car location at the Ahwatukee Airport, right? I just made that airport up. It's a real place, but not trying to single out any of my friends. But same with STEM. It's if at the end of this funnel now we're like science, technology, educate, math, but those kids have not gotten any of that really throughout. Like, it has to be a more holistic process. You can't just say at the end, oh, you should do this. I mean, you can do a lot of things. I mean, I'm a business degree holder who works in journalism, and I would tell my interns, I would ask them, first question, what's your major? They said journalism. I'd go, wrong, change it right now. You're young, change it to something better. You don't need a degree in journalism to be a journalist. You just have to be a good writer and, be knowledgeable about something. Why don't you just major in something that you want to write about and get knowledge in that field and experience in that field? And then you could write for Energy and Environment News or Law 360 or, a trade publication. There's lots of possibilities, but one of them is you should study journalism. You can take a class in it. It'll count towards your English requirement, but there's not that much they can teach you. I mean, really, you should be studying computers because, computers are what journalists use. And, you have to know HTML code. You have to know how to manipulate audio and video and be really good at that. And if they didn't teach you that in journalism school and they were teaching you Strunk and White, and correct grammar and all this other stuff, you can learn both. But I think it's always better to specialize in something if you want to write about it or do it than to kind of pick a relevant field.
Actually, you bring. I like the fact that you brought up a more holistic approach, because one of the things a mixed blessing of all the COVID isolation is it's given me a really good time to reinvent myself outside of my academics. And for the past 2 years, I've been on a real quest to try to de-nerdify myself, so to speak. Mm-hmm. And one of the elements I found in a lot of the high school track to college is that there's not much emphasis on getting competence in more than one field. But I found from projects I've worked on and what I studied that it's super important. In some ways, the major you're in is almost irrelevant professionally if you don't have any capacity for understanding things outside the field. I always like to be a bit arrogant myself and assume that I'm not going to become folly to the engineer's problem or engineer syndrome, but you don't hear much concern about that as I'm not being very clear with my thoughts right now, but you get the idea, right?
No, but you could be a CPA with an engineering degree. I could have been a CPA with a degree in marketing. That was my degree. I wanted to be an advertising, agency exec because I thought I was creative. Didn't really work out for me, but that's okay. There are just lots of it's about getting the holistic approach, and that's an approach of the Jesuits, the Catholic order that runs my high school and runs my college, and they believe in curia personalis in Latin, or curing the whole person. So you do have to take science, you do have to take language, you do have to take math. I took some interesting courses in college. I studied nuclear weapons and seismology. How is that relevant to me today? Well, I guess I can look at the seismometer and determine things about the explosions at the Marine Corps base 4 miles from my house when they shake it. But it was a fun class, and I learned a lot. I also took cryptology, code breaking, and that was fun. How is that relevant? I'm not a hacker, but we spent the entire semester trying to break an RSA key, and it was fun. It was a lot of fun. And so, learning things that are outside of what people say is exactly relevant. I remember I took a class on, I took one on Ignatian spirituality because I thought it was going to be easy because I already knew it, but it was a little harder because the teacher was a Jesuit priest. What was another fun class? One was understanding the weather. I didn't take that; my sister did. But I have friends who went to our meteorology school, and he's a meteorologist for Amazon. He's got one of the coolest jobs. But my sister now understands the weather, and that's when you start forcing people into very narrowly defined things, that kind of people change. I might not want to, just like I didn't want to work on the Hill forever. I didn't study for that. I have a minor in political science, and I knew politics. But I was able to, transition into something else. And, who knows? The Bulwark might be the end of my road in journalism. I don't envision myself enjoying working at a lot of other places. So I'll have to find something else to do. And I'm lucky that my education prepared me for that. I'd have to do some touching up, some of my old textbooks over there. But if you have one more question, I got to go get ready for this next podcast here. But
of course. What's the thing you're most... Okay, I'll start... Well, I've done something positive. What are you looking forward to next week that's positive?
Something that's positive. I just don't think in these terms. I'm looking forward to the slow wholesale destruction of the current iteration of the Republican Party, but that's going to take a very long time. So that's a negative that I'm looking forward to, and I think positively about, because I want it to go away and I want something better to replace it. I'm looking forward. There are some economists like Tyler Cowen who can kind of be doomsayers, and he's not wrong in a lot of places. He's a brilliant George Mason economist. But, I'm not excited about them asking for cell phones, like that 8-bit Christmas movie on HBO, if you watched that. But technology in their world is going to be so interesting. I mean, because the world has changed so much from when my parents were my age to when I got to their age. I mean, technology, I forget the law about how quickly technology adapts. It's just adapted like crazy over time and faster than anticipated. And we have holograms now. You know, you think of Back to the Future too, when, you know, Marty goes into the kind of current day-ish future. It's kind of comical about what they thought the future would be and what it actually was. And so, you know, that's sort of an optimism. You know, hopefully I'll remain good at computers and employable during that time, but I'm not worried yet.
Yeah, that's fair. All right, well, folks, you heard it straight from him, and it's always great having you on this live stream, and always hit me up whenever you need anything.
Hey, thanks, and hope to come back again someday. And just remember, guys, birds aren't real.
Yep, that's the key takeaway here. Forget, me blowing up planes, whatever. Listen to this dude. Birds aren't real. We saw it in Fallout 4, so this is further verification. It's peer-reviewed information.
If it flies, it spies, and, pigeons are liars. But, with the burying of underground power lines, they're running out of places to recharge. So, maybe we'll win this back and get real birds back. But I'm sure you're actually familiar with the joke about birds aren't real.
I'm sorry that I'm not, but I think I'm kind of not sorry.
Okay, no, it's actually really funny. They're making fun of QAnon.
I knew it had to be QAnon related. Almost everything ties into that.
It's a bunch of people your age have come up with this whole movement to make fun of their boomer QAnon parents.
Oh.
So they go around insisting that birds aren't real. It's to kind of get people to understand that there aren't alternative facts. Birds are real.
Yeah.
It's really clever. Check out their videos. I'm not a nut job. I actually think birds are real. But
obviously, no.
I love what those kids are doing, and I love satire. So
I'll be sure to do so.
Awesome. I'll send you my favorite video later. But thanks again to all your listeners, and you can always follow me here on the Twitters. Hope you read our publication, and remember, paying for media is a good thing, not just because it benefits me. See ya.
See ya. Alright, so that's Jim Swift of the Bulwark coming in to give us some more insight. I like this guy because I'm not going to call him old, but he's certainly a lot younger than the rest of the staff, aside from a few others, so he got some more insight on these things. Well, I'll just put this way. This dude plays Call of Duty Warzone. Okay, that's a pretty good endorsement as to his understanding of our views on things. So as far as I'm concerned, we're legit. Now, I'm probably getting tired of playing Project Wingman, but I've made it so far in the sub, I think I might as well continue on. But I've used up enough of my parents' internet bandwidth, so good night, folks, and stay... I don't know, what was it from that Filthy Frank song? Stay woke or something? It was like Flex Like Michael, whatever. Whatever, folks. Good night, and thanks for showing up.